Hi friends, welcome to Ofa Studies YouTube channel. This is part 90 in Azure Data Factory Real-Time Scenarios playlist. In this video, we are going to discuss about flowlets in mapping data flows. Let me give you a theoretical idea about what is flowlet. If you are from a programming background, you know something called functions, right? User-defined functions, right? Whenever we create any user-defined function, we can pass some parameters as a data to that function and some return value we will get. That means some data will be written. So functions are nothing but like it will take some data and do a process according to your code logic and return some data back, right? And flowlets are actually similar to like that. Usually why you create functions normally in the programming or even in the SQL, if you assume certain task can be done multiple times throughout your process, then you can create a function for that particular task by taking that lines of code into one function and make use of that function call every time, right? So the same way here also in mapping data flows, let's assume there are certain transformations you want to do multiple times in multiple data flows you want to execute the same transformations. So in that case what you can do, you can create a flowlet for all those steps or transformations and use that flowlet inside that data flows wherever you want to call that. When I practically explain this, you will make more sense of it. And here it is a theoretical definition from the documentation. A flowlet is a reusable container of the activities or transformations that can be created from the existing mapping data flow, or you can create from the scratch also. From the existing mapping data flow also you can create a flowlet by highlighting the transformations whatever you want to repeat, take it into a flowlet, or you can create it from the scratch as well. All this may be not making sense at this moment. Let me go to the Azure Data Factory and let me try to practically show you this. So let me open my Azure Data Factory here, ADF Mahir, and once you open Azure Data Factory you need to click this open button here or open link here on this tile to open Data Factory, right? So you know this. So let's wait for the Data Factory to load here. So meanwhile, let me go to Azure portal. Let me explain me the requirement first. So let me go back to home page. I have a ADLS Gen 2 account called Mahir ADLS Gen 2, and inside this ADLS Gen 2 account, if I navigate to containers, there is a container called text container actually. So inside that text container, I have folder. So there is a folder called data. So this data folder. So inside this data folder, I have employees.csv file and department.csv file. So if I open this employees.csv file, let's assume in my scenario, if I have any duplicate rows in the employees.data file, I need to remove the duplicates and process only the real rows by removing the duplicates. If you see here, this row is duplicated, right? Because one Mahir mail, this is already there in this employee file. Okay, this is a CSV file, comma separated file. Okay, similarly, so one data flow should take this employees file and process this file into output folder of the same container as a employees.csv file only, but make sure to remove the duplicates. And maybe I want to create another data flow that will take this departments.csv file as a input, and here also do the same thing, remove any duplicates. If you see here, 2 comma hr is a duplicate row, so remove duplicates and process this data and load it into a output folder of the same container. So if I go back to container here, there is a folder called output folder. So inside this output folder I want the data to become. So my requirement is 2 data flows, one to process employees.csv file, another one to process department.csv file. But the requirement is same. In every case I want to remove the duplicates and process the data. So let me go to Data Factory now, and inside the Data Factory let me go to this author menu by clicking this pencil icon. Let me try to create a new data file. So here let me add a source. Let me practically show you how to do that first. So here, right, this is a source transformation. So if you have seen all my ADF playlist, by this time you already know how to use these transformations and data flow. So I am naming this source step as employee, and here let me try to create a new data set, and ADLS Gen 2 is my account, CSV is the format of the file, and let me name it like maybe employees. And this linked service actually points to the same ADLS Gen 2. If I open this, you can see that, see, it is pointing to Mahir ADLS Gen 2 account only. Okay, so let me cancel this here. So first row in my file is a header, and let me browse for the file here. So under test container there is a folder called data. Under the data folder I have a file called employees.csv file. So let me select that and let me click OK. So this is going to create a source transformation for the employee file. So whenever you want to perform this data preview and all, you need to make sure to enable this data flow debug option. So I am trying to enable the data flow debug option. Now inside this source transformation, if I go to inspect, I can see all the columns from my source file, that is employees file, came here, ID, name, gender. Okay, so if I go back here and see, department file has ID and name columns only, but if I go to employees.csv file, it has ID, name and gender. Let me practically show you this by clicking this edit button. See, ID, name and gender. So here schema came. Now what I want to do, I want to remove the duplicates. So there are multiple ways to remove the duplicates. So for this video, what I am trying to do is I am going to use aggregate transformation to perform group by. So since these two rows are group same values, if I perform group by, these two rows are going to become a single row actually. So group by, you know, right, if the same values are there in that columns, they are going to merge as a single row, right? So let's try to do that else. So here add a aggregate transformation, and I want to group by three columns, ID, name and gender. Then only these two rows will become a single row, right? So group by three columns. So let me do this here under the aggregate transformation. So let me select this aggregate transformation here and here. So maybe I will say group by ID, and then group by name, and then group by gender. Okay, now under the aggregate column we need to get some column back. So maybe I'm creating a dummy column called count. Anyways, this column is not going to be used, so this column should not go into my sync file. So let me open this expression builder for that count column here. So by here maybe I am going to use a count function simply. Okay, so this is going to get a count of rows. So that means group by ID, name and gender. So this will become a single row and count will become 2. Why? Because there are two rows with the same data. And for this row, this is going to be a single row only. Here count is going to be 1. Anyways, the count is only to avoid the syntax error, or the to make sure this group by work here. Okay. So because group by always need some aggregate function to be used, so I used a count function here. Okay. So let me select this count function here. So if I go to inspect column now, if you see under output, I am getting ID, name, gender and count. And when I perform a data preview now, you will make sense. Actually the duplicate rows got deleted. Actually they are not deleted, they got merged as a single row actually. So let's wait for the debug session to start here so that I can perform the data preview and show you. So meanwhile, let me change name of this data flow, saying like maybe EMP because this is going to process the employee data flow. So data flow is enabled now. Now we can click this refresh button to fetch the preview data here. Great. See, now we got employee ID 1 as a one row only. Why? Because we performed group by, but count became 2. Why? Because two rows were there with the same data, right? So now what I will do, maybe after doing this, I can use the select transformation, and in the select transformation, I can remove this count column and I can perform the data load, right? Or I can directly use a sync transformation here to load this data into maybe output folder of the same storage. So let's use a sync transformation, create a new data flow here, data set here for Gen2, same CSV format, continue. I can name it maybe like output folder. Okay, so I am going to name it like output folder, and I can use the same linked service of ADLS Gen2. First row is header. Let me browse the location. Under test container there is a folder called output folder. So inside this folder I want to place it. There is no schema, so let's not select any file here. Let's click OK, and then if I go to settings, I want to store this file as a single output file. So select that option and click this set single partition and enter a name. Maybe I want to name it like employees.csv. So this is the file name in the output folder I want to keep. And then I can go to mapping, disable this auto mapping. I can mention like ID, name and gender should populate in my output file, but count I don't want. So I can remove that. If I perform this data preview here I can see ID, name, gender columns, and I can see only the non-duplicate data. So there won't be any duplicate rows. So let's wait for the data fetch to happen here. Great. See like this we can remove the duplicates. But so now what will happen, maybe I want to do the same thing for using another data flow, and this data flow should process the department file. So it is going to be same implementation, right? Department.df. So this is to process a department file, and here I will add a source transformation. Maybe I will name it like dep the source transform is going to be my department file, so I will name it dep, and add new data flow here, ADLS Gen2 account CSV format, and I can name it like DEP file or DEP something. Select linked service of your ADLS Gen2. First row is header. Browse the location under test container data folder. There is something called departments.csv file. Select it and let click OK. So this is going to create a data set for the departments.csv file. If I go to inspect, I can see ID and name columns here, right? ID and name columns. And if I go to data preview, if I refresh, I will be seeing that department ID and department name columns along with the preview data as well. And as I shown before, the department file also has some dummy data there. So let's wait for the data to fetch here. Meanwhile, I am going to use the same aggregate transformation and if you see here data preview happened, if you see there is department id 2 HR is duplicated. So under aggregate transformation, what I am going to do, I am going to group by id and name both the same way like what I did before, right? And then here I will go to aggregate, and here maybe I will use a count function just to, because it is a group by, so I need to make sure to use some aggregate function. So let's click this open expression builder here, and I will use a count function here to get a count of each row when they perform the group by. And let me click the refresh button here. Great, see there is no duplicate rows now. Now what I will do, maybe I will use a sync transformation, and in the sync transformation, the same way what I did in the EMP data flow, the same way I will be selecting a data set which is pointing to my output folder, and under settings I want to make sure this output to be as a single file, and file name I want to keep it like maybe dep.csv file. And then under mappings I can disable this auto mapping, and I can load only id and name columns. I don't want this count column. So if I go on to data preview, and if I perform the data preview here, I should see only non-duplicate rows. See, only non-duplicate rows. But if you have closely observed, the same kind of requirement or same kind of transformations I did multiple times, because I have created multiple data flows to process multiple files. So in these cases we can create a Flowlet and make use of it. So let me try to actually show you how to create a Flowlet. Click this here and select this new Flowlet, and here to the Flowlet I can use any file as a source, or I can use a input here. So I have selected it, or you click it here, it will ask you either you can add a source transformation or use input. So I am using input. If I go to input here, and if you closely observe, so this input should have the schema of the input files or input schema what you want to pass to this Flowlet. So my requirement is this Flowlet to process both employee and department file and try to remove the duplicates, right? So I should make sure the metadata or the column names here should cover all those columns. If you see, my employee file has, my department file has id and name column, right? If you see, department file has id and name column. If I go to employee file has actually id, name, gender. So in the Flowlet I should use id. This id column is there in the employee file and department file, so fine. Name column is there in the employee file and department file, fine. But gender column is missing in the department file. So still if it is missing, you need to make sure to keep all these three. So Flowlets should try to have the schema of all the column names whatever it is going to process. So it is going to process two files in my case. So for the two files, whatever the columns we have, we should cover all the columns. And then when you try to invoke this Flowlet in the data flow, if you are not going to use this third column gender, then you can pass some dummy value to it, and you can remove that column at the end of the data flow in the sync transformation. So when I practically implement this, you will make sense. So add all the columns so that these column names should cover all the column names from the both the files which it is trying to process. And there on top of it, let's try to use the same aggregate function, and in the aggregate function the same way, like, so whatever the logic we implemented before, we are going to perform the group by based upon the input schema so that we can remove the duplicates. So this entire thing I am doing it inside the Flowlet. I am not doing it inside any data flow. Okay, let me select this aggregate transformation, and here let me select this gender column. Now Flowlets, and one more thing, if you closely observe, Flowlets will not have any data preview option here. You cannot preview data here. So once this aggregation is completed, then maybe I want to do, okay, so in the aggregate I need to make sure to use some aggregate column also, right? Aggregate function also. So use a column called count. Open the expression builder, and in the expression builder let's try to use this count function. So let me save these changes, and maybe what I can do here itself, maybe I can remove this count column also. So what I can do, I can add this select transformation, and in the select transformation I can say I don't want this count column, so I want only these three columns back. So this is my Flowlet, and once the Flowlet is completed, at the what you can do, you can save this Flowlet, and you can try to refer this Flowlet in your data flow actually. So what I will do now let's try to create a new data flow. Okay, and now, so this is also like same processing employee file only, but this time with Flowlet. So let me use this employee data flow underscore Flowlet, and here let's add a source transformation. The same thing, this is, let's assume, a employee file, and select employees data set here, and if I go to data preview, it will give me all the data from my employee file. So let's wait for the data preview to happen here. Let me select the source transformation, and let me make sure to okay, so you can see here data is fetching here. Yeah, see, we got the data back. So now once we got this, what we can do, see, Flowlet, if you go to Flowlet is expecting three columns in the input: id, name, and gender. and if I see this implementation, here also I have ID, name and gender, 3 columns are there, so no need to worry. So I can directly add a flowlet here. So to add it, I can select flowlet from the from this flowlets section, and inside the flowlet I should make sure to select my flowlet what I created. So select this flowlet, and now if I go to inspect, I can see here input columns are ID, name and gender, and output columns from the flowlet is empty. Okay, so let me go back to flowlet here. So inside the flowlet, I forgot one thing. At the end of the flowlet, actually you need to add this output here. So add this output, and in the output go to this inspect and make sure you are getting all the columns or not. Now go to the data flow what you are trying to create to process the employee file using flowlet, and here if you see under output of the flowlet, I can see this all the 3 columns came. So now what I can do, I can simply add the sync transformation here, and in the sync transformation I can select that output folder dataset what I created, and go to settings. I want the file to be as a single file, and I can name this file as maybe like emp.csv file maybe, and go to mappings. You can keep auto mapping or disable auto mapping, and try to map your source and sync columns properly. If you see here source and sync columns, so this is what I want to keep it, so let's not touch anything. Now if I refresh this, I should see non-duplicate data here using the flowlet. See, we got non-duplicate rows. So that means using the flowlet we are able to process the employee file and get non-duplicate rows. So similarly, let's try to create a new data flow, and this time let's try to process this department file using the department data flow using the flowlet. Okay, so here let's add source, and I can keep the source name as department maybe, and here I can select my department data set, and if I go to data preview and if I refresh, I should see department data which has some duplicate values. So if you remember, HR department is duplicated, right? So let's wait for the data preview to happen here. Great, see department file has some duplicate data HR row. So now what I will do, I won't do anything, I will simply use the flowlet what I created. So for that I will go here, select this flowlet, and inside the flowlet I will select the flowlet what I am interested to use here. And if I go to inspect tab here, now if you see input columns has ID and a name, but output column is expecting gender column as well. So you need to make sure to have some dummy gender column, because flowlet is expecting that column also to be passed, right? So what you can do before using this flowlet, you need to create some dummy column using derived column, and here I am going to name this column as gender, and maybe value for this column I am going to supply some dummy value. So let me open this expression builder, and I am going to supply value maybe something like ABCD, some dummy value. Okay, so let me save these changes. Now if I go to flowlet, if I go to mappings, okay, I need to make sure, so okay, from the derived column whatever the gender column I am getting, I want to map that gender column to the flowlet gender column. Now let's go to data preview here, and let's try to perform the data refresh. So inside the flowlet we have that group by logic, and also removing the count function, count column logic and everything, right? So when you try to perform the data preview on the flowlet itself, it should remove that duplicate data, and it should show you the data what you are interested in here, but it will get the gender column as well because flowlet has that column, right? So now what you can do on top of this, you can use a select transformation and you can remove the gender column, or directly use a sync transformation, and in the sync transformation select your output folder where you want to load the file, and under the mappings remove this auto mapping and remove the gender as well. So that way you can remove the gender column, the dummy column what you created, to make sure your flowlet works, because flowlet is expecting to pass the gender column also, right? Because flowlet has to have the schema for all the files whatever it will try to process. So gender column is there in the employee file, so our intention is flowlet should be useful to process the employee file as well. And if you see here, now we have non-duplicate row. So like this, using the flowlets you can very easily convert your reusable transformations as a single flowlet transformation, and use that flowlet wherever you want. Not only this, you no need to create this flowlet every time by clicking this button and creating a new flow. For example, in this example, for example here itself you felt a need like I can create a flowlet transformation for this particular aggregate function, then what you can do here itself, you can do that. So here what you can do is, if I let me do one thing, let me, if there is something called here turn on multi select, right? Select this option and then try to select your transformation here. So I am selecting my transformation here. The moment I did it, so it is selected my transformation. Now right click. So in my case there is only one transformation. In real time there may be 10 transformation you want to select, so you can select them and then right click on them and select this create new data flow, sorry, new flowlet. So it is going to create a flowlet. See, it automatically created a flowlet. This is input. It named input as emp. You can change it if you want. I can say an input only. And if you see, it got the input schema automatically. And in the aggregate, it got all the logic automatically. See, group by ID, name and gender. And if I go to aggregates, here I will see the count, and also then immediately it is outputting here. So why? Because the select transformation to remove this count column is not there in my employee data flow where I created the flowlet, right? So that's why it is not there. So to make sure that to come, what I can do is I can maybe here itself I can add that select transformation. So let me hit this plus sign here, and let me select this select transformation here. And in the select transformation, what I am going to do, I am going to remove this count column which is not interested to me. So, and now let's try to create a flowlet using these two transformations. I can practically show you this. So let me always try to select this turn on multi select, and then select your transformations from here to here, and I want to make sure to convert these transformations as a flowlet. Right click on it and select this create flowlet. So it is going to create a flowlet called flowlet 2, and if you see input here, it came as a emp. I can rename it to our input. See id name column, gender name, id name, gender columns, and under aggregate I can see the group by, and in the aggregates here I can see the count column also, and there is a select transformations also which is removed the count, and then finally loaded it as a output of the flowlet. And this flowlet you can directly use in your further data flows whatever you try to create. So you can create this flowlet very easily by selecting that graphical user interface as well. So this is how flowlets are very useful in real time, where you feel a need of converting the uh, transformations into a some function kind of thing. You can reuse the transformations, create one flowlet and reuse the transformations n number of times in the data flows wherever you want. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to get the notifications whenever I add videos. Thank you so much.